Thanks for staying with us. We're now moving to Rivers State, as it were, to open another chapter that is happening there. The State House of Assembly has issued a notice of gross misconduct against Governor Siminalayi Fubara and his deputy, Professor Ngozi Odu. The lawmakers, in a statement on March 16, claimed their action aligns with Section 188 of the Nigerian Constitution. In response, the Rivers State government has condemned the Assembly's actions, warning of a bleak future due to legislative obstruction. The government insists the Assembly is blocking the full implementation of the Supreme Court's judgment on the state's ongoing political crisis. Commissioner for Information Joseph Johnson accused the lawmakers of deliberately preventing Governor Fubara from executing the court's ruling. He linked the crisis to an earlier failed impeachment attempt against the governor on October 30, 2023. To help us discuss this Barrister Elvis Asia, a legal practitioner, of course, and we have Comrade Adebayo, National Spokesperson, Coalition of United Political Parties. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
Good morning.
Birthday wish you, Nyamgul.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Well, I'm a year older. Past the threshold, according to Mr. Adebayo, the life expectancy in Nigeria. I've crossed that one. Everything else is extra. But today we're talking Rivers State. Let me start with you, Barrister Elvis. The Supreme Court gave judgment. The Rivers State government allegedly is trying to implement it, and it is being fueled. What is the implication of this if there is enough evidence that the State House of Assembly is fueling the attempt to implement the judgment of the Supreme Court? What happens in that kind of a situation? If they boycott what is supposed to be done and they are fueling the attempts to carry out what has been directed by the Supreme Court, now what happens?
Well, I think the first point that must be made is that I'm not surprised about these developments from the Amigole-led Rivers State House of Assembly. This has been the goal all along since the political fallout between Fubara and Wike, and so this is not surprising. And this also answers the question why it will appear that the House is not interested in whatever the government is going to do in compliance with the judgment of the Supreme Court. Their interest is simply that they have now been restored, they have the majority, and they have the capacity, within their political understanding to put out the government. So, quite frankly, their actions clearly suggest, even the action and public pronouncements of Mr. Wike has suggested that, they are not interested in peace in Rivers. They're not interested in following the process in Rivers. What they want is to have Fubara out of the way. And this notice that has been issued has set the tone for that to happen. And so nobody should be surprised that this is happening. Now, with respect to the decision of the Supreme Court, my understanding, when two people are contesting an issue with respect to their rights, their liabilities and obligations, and the issues are submitted to a court of law, my understanding is that once the court makes a decision, people are supposed to start on a clean slate, particularly when the issues has political undertone as we have in Rivers. My understanding is that, for example, is that both sides will implement the decision of the Supreme Court, ensure that the House is properly functioning, ensure that the budget is presented, ensure that all the things that the Supreme Court said were not right are removed, and then in the interest of the people, both sides will sit down and then ensure that there's governance for the people of Rivers. But unfortunately, it will appear that, like I said earlier, the House of Assembly, led by the non-member of the House, Mr. Wike, are not really interested in governors of Rivers. They don't want Fubara out. And so it is quite unfortunate. And the impeachment process under the Constitution ordinarily supposed to provide a system that allows the basis for seeking impeachment to be interrogated, not just by the House, but also by independent members of the public as are to be appointed by the Chief Judge. So it is expected that, if it gets to that, they'll be able to see through all of this and, say that this issue of gross misconduct that is being alleged as it relates to the implementation of the Supreme Court decision does not appear to be genuine and honest. Because at least we have seen communication, we have seen public statements, we have seen movements on the side of the governor seeking to comply with the decision of the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, that decision, a lot of us have expressed issues with it, has given the hammer to achieve the goal they have had all along. So, it's really a sad day for democracy, and I hope that reason will still prevail in all of this to ensure that we don't turn our political system to men kangaroo, that can be decided by somebody who is not even in the state, or a member of the House of Assembly, or a member of the executive arm of government. And quite frankly, it's a direct affront on the spirit behind the decision of the Supreme Court.
All right, Comrade Mark, let's come to you and let's just look at how everything started. So before now, that was like 2023, which is over 18 months. Rivers State has had this ruckus between Nyesom Wike and obviously the current governor, similarly Fubara. A failed attempt at impeachment in 2023, and now we're back again in 2025 on this. What does this say about the political stability of Rivers State as a whole?
Well, we're making a mistake thinking that this crisis can be limited to Rivers State, because it is something that affects the whole body policy of Nigeria. Sincerely speaking, you are seeing the twin evil of godfatherism in politics and the phenomenon of state capture. That is what is happening in Rivers State, and that is what is happening all over. Because look, make no mistake about it. A crisis in one corner of Oyo State, of the then Western state of Nigeria, consumed the First Republic. The crisis that started in those states, in 1983, consumed the Second Republic. Now, here we are again. Nigerian politicians are the worst enemies of democracy. Because when you run a democracy, what we run here is supposed to be constitutional democracy, meaning that everybody must abide by the rule of law, obey court orders, and do everything in accordance with the Constitution. But here we have a phenomenon here in this country that Professor Patrick Wilmot quoted in his book in 1983 or 84, where he described Nigerian politicians as having a disruptive orientation to reality. They are always disruptive, they scatter things, they don't respect the laws, they don't follow the due processes of law, and that's what leads to the death of democracy and justice. Now, everybody understands and knows the fact that what is happening in Rivers State is about the interplay of power play between two factions. And like the lawyer said, the assignment, the focus, the vision, the target from the very beginning has been to remove the governor, because of certain disagreement between him and his estranged godfather. And that's the problem. And when this phenomenon of godfatherism, it is the governors of every state that suffers. It is the people that suffer when there is a crisis between godfather and godson. And that is the phenomenon we have in this country that is killing our democracy. Now, what is happening in Rivers State is quite understandable to the fact that there are people who believe they are in power and they want to misuse the power to achieve their own personal interests. That Shino Achebe, late Professor Shino Achebe, called self-centered patricianism. That is what is happening. There are people who believe they are in power, they can manipulate power, they can misuse power to achieve their personal advancement. That is why the pro-PK group in the river crisis are hell-bent on making sure they remove the governor and his deputy, so that the minister of FCT can put somebody who's going to be lacking in the River State governor's house, so that he can now go back to controlling to continue his third-term agenda in that state. So the problem we are having, we don't have politicians who really have the interest of the country or the people at heart. So all is about power, all is about self, all is about avarice and misbehavior. A lot of people in the political realm of Nigeria today just behave like political miscreants who do not believe in the due process of law, who do not respect court orders. Here we have a situation that the Supreme Court of the Federal Republic of Nigeria delivered a judgment, gave orders for the state government to implement, and governor expeditiously started implementing those processes, calling these people for a peace meeting. They refused to go, wrote to them that was coming to represent the 2025 annual appropriation bill. They refused, they locked the gate against him. Now, they turned down and scattered every piece of overtures that this man has made, just because their main target is to ensure that he's removed as governor and his deputy goes with him, because maybe they believe that one will not also play ball. Until the people are able to arise. You see now, we have discovered that it's no longer enough for us to protect our votes. We also need to protect the people who have voted into power, because of the political fox and political foxes and political lions and hyenas who are moving about, making sure that the will of the people is supplanted, the will of the people is compromised. So, the way it is going, the way the wicked are mismanaging this democracy. Even the president himself, look at what has happened in Lagos, the Lagos House of Assembly, where an internal democratic processes of the assembly was executed to remove the former speaker. Now, by the fiat of the president, Obasa is back in the house as speaker. And in the case that already he was in court, they did not even allow the court to make pronouncement, to make ruling, to make judgment. They said they found political solution. And that house is still in disarray. So, as it goes for Rivers, it's also going for Lagos State. There's crisis everywhere. Who are the ones creating this crisis? Politicians in power. Politicians in power who are so desperate and ferociously attached to power to the extent that they have forgotten that this life is transient in nature. Power is transient in nature. There are former presidents in this country today who are totally powerless and irrelevant today. There have been governors, several governors, who are totally irrelevant, and even though they are alive, they are irrelevant. Nobody knows they exist. So this crazy romance with power by African politicians is the biggest problem in terms that is causing poverty, underdevelopment, and retrogression in this continent, especially in Nigeria, that is supposedly the giant of Africa. It is unfortunate, and the people, Nigerian people, must not allow these things just to go like that. If the cause are helpless, before you remove a governor, it's clearly stated in the constitution, the step by step you are going to take. The chief judge needs to constitute a panel, but I can bet you these people are not going to follow the due process in terms of even illegally impeaching this man. Because there is no legal means by which they can impeach him. You just see that they sit down, set up a kangaroo panel, and say they are this man. And they are likely going to cause unmitigated crisis and unmitigatable crisis in that state. The militants are already threatening our oil installations and the rest of that. And if we could go back, everything would just scatter. And it could lead to the untimely death, the premature death of this democracy. And the people that are for this, politicians in power, including the president himself, and this wicked of a man. I mean, you can't.
All right, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
It's uncontrollable. What are we doing? What kind of country? You can't turn us into a banana republic.
All right, Barrister Sia, I don't know, there are no sentiments in law and all that, but if the governor is trying to implement the ruling of the Supreme Court and these people are obstructing it, can it count for anything for him?
Well, like I was trying to say, it's impeachment, particularly within the Nigerian system. It is a political tool that is wielded by those who have the powers to wield it. Yes, it's supposed to count for him in a sense that he's trying to implement the decision of the Supreme Court. But the point they are making is that they are going back to issues that occur before the decision. For example, the presentation of the budget to the other house, and other things that happened before the decision of the Supreme Court. And that's where I have issues with this process. Because, like I said earlier, if two parties are going to court to resolve their dispute, the issues that were in dispute until the resolution of that dispute by the court, it is expected that both parties will start from the point of the decision of the court, and not to use the fact that you thought you had the right before and acted in that regard, to now become a basis for seeking to punish you, particularly when you have, expressly displayed readiness to implement the decision of the court. So it should already count, but the challenge with the process, like I said, is the political undertone. And don't forget that even before this notice was issued, they were already making plans on how they can get a panel, a favorable panel. They petitioned the chief judge, who they think is not going to be in their favor, because the chief judge constitutionally has the power to appoint the seven-member panel to investigate the notice or the allegations of gross misconduct, and the decision of that panel is final. If they decide that there was no gross misconduct, but you can see that before this time, they attacked the chief judge, by petitioning him to the DSS, as the State Security Service, in a bid to ensure that he plays ball. Because whether you like it or not, that is blackmail on the chief judge, either expressly or impliedly. It's clear blackmail. You ask yourself, why was this issue of the chief judge never brought to the fore until now? Because they believe that, if the chief judge doesn't want to constitute a panel that is favorable to them, they will use this petition to try to beat him to line. And this is really quite frankly inconsistent with the ideals of the right to impeachment that's decided by the House of Assembly, and it is inconsistent with democratic tenets. This blackmail of everybody in an attempt to beat everybody into line is really very sad for our democracy. And it is hoped that there will still be people in Rivers who will stand up to what is right and ensure that the justice prevails in this matter. And the justice of the case, in my view, whatever has happened on both sides, is for both the House to go about its normal duties, and for the governor to be allowed to perform his executive.
Okay, I was going to ask, right? I mean, one thing that the government has said is the fact that the Assembly is obstructing the Supreme Court's ruling. Now, can a legislative body, delay the actions of the Supreme Court?
Well,
I'm speaking to Elvis.
okay.
Quite frankly, the legislative arm has no power, has no right to obstruct the decision of not just any other court, of the Supreme Court. In fact, the legislative arm does not even have the power to obstruct the decision of any court. When we talk about the final court in the land, it is really amounts to gross disregard for the rule of law, that amounts to gross disregard for democratic tenets. And quite frankly, it is unethical in parliamentary business for the House to stand in the way of the implementation of the decision of the court, and then use that as a basis for seeking the impeachment of the governor in the circumstances of this case. This is a very sad development, and like I said, it must be resisted by all well-meaning Nigerians, and particularly people from River State. You cannot obstruct the governor, you cannot prevent the governor from presenting the budget, and then use that as a basis for seeking his impeachment, which means that this whole charade has been happening all along. The fact that the governor is looking at reaching them, trying to find them, they gave ultimatum without proper delivery of the letter to the governor from the information we have, and then the governor wrote them to say, look, let us resolve all of these issues. All the issues they are traversing in their notice are issues the governor has, written to them in respect of resolving them in line with the decision of the Supreme Court. So it is the River State House of Assembly has no power to obstruct the implementation of the decision of the Supreme Court, and it's even worse that they want to use that obstruction as a basis for seeking the impeachment of the governor.
All right. Comrade, now let's just wrap up with this. Looking at this crisis in Rivers State, how it has escalated for this long and prolonged for this amount of time, what do you think should happen right now? Of course, there's been an issue of impeachment, the notice to Governor Fubara at the moment, but how do you think the political parties or the government can just galvanize themselves to ensure that this is sorted once and for all?
But one single solution to this is for everybody. One single panacea to this is for everybody to follow the due process of law. The due process of law. If everybody is law abiding, not everything will be solved. I mean,
hello, sir. I think we just had an issue with the audio there. But I mean, we've just been speaking about the crisis in Rivers State, and there's been an impeachment notice to the governor of Rivers State. There's been one in, October 2023, but here we are again, same thing.
I think the House of Assembly is bound to make a mistake because they are too bent on doing this. I'm not sure they're following the due process, and they will make such a mistake that maybe what their plan is may not work. I don't know why they're so fixated. There is a statement credited to the FCT minister. It's not confirmed, so I cannot say it's the truth. But that statement said that the problem of impeachment will only go away if the governor accepts to return local governments to him, the control of local governments to him, so that he chooses who administers the local government, he chooses what happens to the funds of the local government and all that. And whether this is true or not, his body language has shown that he wants to have absolute control on what goes on in Rivers State. Like one of our guests said, he wants to continue his tenure, the third term.
Yeah. In fact, I was just writing Godfatherism, because that's one thing one of our guests said as well. It's just saying Godfatherism.
I'm not sure he thinks of himself as a godfather. I think he thinks of himself as a god. Remove the father inside. Because if you can come out and make pronouncements, godfathers stay on the background. At the background, nobody sees them. Godfathers pull the strings from the background. He's not pulling strings from the background. He's coming out to slap.
Being in the forefront.
He will do anything, say anything, and go scot-free. The president will not rein him in. The party cannot rein him in. I
have something to say about that, but I'm going to allow it.
Talk about it. So I think he has the God complex, not godfatherism.
Well. All right. This is how much we can take on the show today. We've just been speaking with Elvis Asia. He's a legal practitioner, and Comrade Adebayo. He's the spokesperson for the coalition of United Political Parties. And we're just looking at the crisis that's been happening in Rivers State. This is how much we can take on the show. Thank you so much for having the breakfast with us. My name is Rume Paulson.
And I am Nyamgul Agaji. Have a wonderful day.
Bye for now.